The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la para llevarte ofertas antes del cut-off. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. From the deserts of Arizona to the mountainous skyscrapers of the nation's largest city, New York City, and outward to 173 countries in all 50 states, and I'm even sure out into the cosmos, the Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. But first, wishing you and yours the best during the sacred seasons of Passover and Easter about to happen, as we welcome you to your weekend. Great guest, as always, here from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. Give us a call during this 2-hour show. The contact number, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. 9222 simply says WABC. And if you have any questions or comments for me, my email is simply drsky, DRSKY, at WABCradio.com. And first, a solemn tribute to those 6 individuals that lost their lives in the horrific helicopter crash that is going around the world. That particular helicopter, a Bell Long Ranger helicopter, a 206L-4, tail number N216MH. May those souls rest in peace. Ladies and gentlemen, always great guest here on the Dr. Sky Experience. And in just a few moments, we'll be talking to a retired NASA astronaut and his brand new book entitled Mission Out of Control, an Astronaut Odyssey to Fix High-Risk Organizations and How to Prevent Tragedy. And in our second hour, we continue with the astronomy theme with a good friend and an astronomer, Carl Heico, who will be talking about us, how to view the nighttime sky, and we'll be both talking about that from both of our sides of experience. But ladies and gentlemen, first, a sincere thank you to Tony, navigating this radio starship powerhouse, 77 WABC, and of course to owner and operator John Katsimatidis and family, and Chad Lopez from the executive staff. Ladies and gentlemen, we've talked here on this particular radio show about many of the things that we see above in the heavens. But our first guest, Dr. Charles Kamar, is a 46-year NASA veteran with over 22 years of experience as a research engineer, 18 years as a NASA astronaut who flew on Space Shuttle mission STS-114, the return-to-flight mission following the Columbia disaster, and 13 years as a senior executive holding positions within the agency as Director of Engineering at NASA's Johnson Space Flight Center, Deputy for Advanced Projects in the NASA Engineering and Safety Center, and Senior Advisor for Innovation and Engineering Development at NASA's Langley Research Center prior to his retirement in 2018. Dr. Kamar is also a native New Yorker like myself. Doctor, we welcome you to the Dr. Sky Experience. Good evening to you and good morning to everyone. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Good evening. Thanks for having me, Dr. Sky.
Well, Doctor, I think it's a fascinating story to talk about here. The main topic of your book, of course, titled Mission Out of Control, an Astronaut Odyssey to Fix High-Risk Organizations and Prevent Tragedy. Talk about your experience as an astronaut who's flown to the International Space Station, who understands a lot about what's going on. Just give us a nutshell overview of what you're talking about in this book, so important to engineers and people who control these different systems to get rockets up into space.
Sure. I grew up and started at NASA back in the early 70s. I was a researcher, and we had a totally different culture. And we looked at solving really tough problems, understanding by test and analysis how things fail, how things behave. And we had a very open environment. We could have a discourse. We could disagree. It was psychologically safe. We could argue. And we had a voice, and our voice was heard. When I became an astronaut, it was a very different culture at Johnson Space Center. It was more of a production culture, schedule and budget. Program managers basically ruled the day, and they had a lot more power over the engineers in the organization. And they acted almost in isolation. They didn't really communicate with the other research centers at NASA to understand and solve problems. So they thought they knew it all. They thought they understood the space shuttle, and bad things happened.
Wow. Let's go back to the early days. You're a native New Yorker like myself, and what's the path to becoming an astronaut? Because you may have people out there, and I'm sure they're out there, who want to call in with many questions about what it's like to be an astronaut. But let's start off with you. How did you become one? I mean, this is not every day just decides one day, I'm going to be an astronaut, and then the mission is fulfilled. The dream came true for you. Tell us that story.
Yeah, I mean, I was I had immigrant Italian grandparents, right, that came to this country. My father had a little family butcher shop with his brother in Ozone Park, Queens. And I was this geeky little kid that grew up during the Cold War, and the first Mercury 7 astronauts were my heroes. It was us against the Russians. I looked at these people as heroes, and I always loved science and engineering, and so that was something I always wanted to do. And I had that in the front of my back of my mind as I was growing up. And my parents encouraged me to go to school, get an education, and that was very important to me. And I had some very good mentors.
It's amazing. Again, there's only, if I look at this correctly in doing some research for the show, there's probably, and this is not an exact number, Doctor, probably only 682 people that ever became an astronaut or could qualify for that. And now with the privatizing of space, as many people know, what, of course, Jeff Bezos is doing and other people like Elon, that's an amazing group. I mean, it started off with the Mercury 7. As you know, it started off with Yuri Gagarin, the first of any human being to go to space. But, I mean, talk a little bit about the development of how you got to do this. You sign up, you go down, and what's the training like? And not everybody passes, I guess, right? Tell us.
Right. Not everybody that actually gets selected to be an astronaut actually gets to fly in space. A very high percentage do pass and do get to fly in space. And so I feel like I was very fortunate. I was very lucky. The one and only flight I did have was right after the Columbia accident. Yes. And I had an amazing crew. And because we had 2.5 years before we would fly again after Columbia, we had about a year and a half to train as a crew of 7 with our trainers on the ground and prepare for that mission.
I remember that mission very well, and it goes back, what, in time, Doctor? Not to date you as far as a timeline, but everybody else. July 26, 2005. Seems, 20 years ago almost.
It's good.
That must have been
coming
amazing
up on our 20-year anniversary. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's amazing. Got to ask you this. I always ask everybody who's, gone to space. I hear different interpretations. You're there in the shuttle, and describe the shuttle for people who may not know the size of this. I mean, I've seen it go off a couple of times. We've watched it on television. We've seen disasters, but we've seen more good come out of it. I mean, describe its size, because you're one of 7. You're a mission specialist, on this mission, but describe it as far as it's like a giant heavy glider, if we want to call it that, right?
Absolutely. It's like a large airplane. It's like almost like a commercial airplane. It has wings. It lands on a runway, and it was an amazing design back in the 70s. When you think about it, they tried to make reusable space flight. They wanted a ship that could basically transport large pieces of the space station into space. So it had a very large payload bay. It weighed about 170,000 pounds. Dry weight, and so you compare that with like a space capsule, which is about 20,000 pounds. It's about more than 8 times the mass that you're putting into orbit. Plus, it would carry a payload of about 60,000 pounds. So it was really a workhorse, a truck that we were flying into space.
Incredible. We've seen them. We've built models of them. I mean, young people, of course, even today. But your Discovery shuttle, I understand, is on permanent display in, if I'm correct, in California. Isn't that a correct statement?
No, my Discovery is actually in the Air and Space Museum, the Uwe Hadzi Museum out near Dulles Airport in D.C.
Oh, a better location. Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. I thought it was the one in California. But what's so interesting about this, unless you've experienced, ladies and gentlemen, an actual shuttle launch, it's just amazing how you got that big vehicle up. And the combination, as you know best, you rode the thing on a liquid and solid rocket motors, of which we talk about hopefully in this interview, some of the things regarding your book about what went wrong going back to the days of Challenger. I mean, this is just a very sad moment in time so long ago. Hopefully people haven't forgotten. But I want to remind the people out there listening across the nation, around the world, the contact number. If you have a question, this is an important time, folks, to get in. If you've always been curious about astronauts, what they do, especially those that have gone to space, truly, not just trained, the contact number 1-800-848-9222. And we await your conversation that you have with us. But, Doctor, this is quite fascinating. So let's talk about STS-114. You go up into space, a long delay after the sad moments of Columbia re-entering the atmosphere, and I don't know, in my layman's terms, I would say, what, the breakup of the shuttle? Is that a fair word? Or the destruction?
Absolutely.
I don't like that word.
Absolutely. It broke apart. Yeah, it broke apart about 100,000 feet right over as it was coming into land at Kennedy Space Center over the southeast portion of Texas. Broke up into about 85,000 pieces. We collected, tried to put them back together, tried to understand what caused the accident. And we realized that it was a large piece of foam that came off the vehicle and hit the underside of the left wing, probably the wing leading edge, probably created a hole. Hot gases entered, it vaporized the structure and disintegrated the vehicle in the skies over Texas.
That's horrible. I mean, I've read a little bit about it, but you have the experience, and of course, you're the commander of this hour as far as we go to space right here with our very special guest, Dr. Charles Kamar. He's also the author of a very interesting book, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But again, your questions and comments are obviously, we await those, because I think this is a great opportunity to talk to a person and listen to the story as you are about those who go to space. His book, Mission Out of Control, a very serious book. An Astronaut Odyssey to fix high-risk organizations and prevent tragedy. And we sure have had a lot of mishaps in space over the course of time, Doctor, but wouldn't you say the overall track record, in your opinion, has been far better than the accidents that we've had? Isn't that a correct statement?
I wouldn't, well, we haven't had as many accidents, but really the safety of the vehicle, that was a very unsafe vehicle. It had a probability of failure of 1 in 67.5.
That's
when you think about it.
Wow.
And the real cause of the tragedy, as was determined by the Columbia accident investigation, was really the culture. The culture had deteriorated at NASA. People were afraid to speak up, and we really didn't have the experts that understood the anomalies they were seeing. And so they really didn't know how to diagnose the critical issues that were occurring, like the O-ring or like the incident with the foam hitting the wing leading edge. We didn't have the right analysis. The people didn't go and talk to the right people that understood these kinds of problems. And so we were a long way away from the research culture that started NASA back during Apollo. We had a tremendous DNA of researchers from the research centers that created the Johnson Space Center, Marshall Space Flight Center. And in the early years, we had those people that had that knowledge at high levels within the organization. As the program grew and became bloated, we lost that. We lost that touch with our roots.
Well, you're lighting this candle, as some astronauts have said in the past, to get to space. We go to our first caller, and we encourage many more here. Let's say good morning to Richard in Pittsburgh. Richard, you're on with former NASA astronaut, our good friend here as we talk through the hour, Dr. Charles Kamar. Good morning to you, Richard. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for taking my call. Here's my question. Can you fly? Can you take the space shuttle and fly to the moon?
No, Richard.
Why not?
It was never designed to fly to the moon. It doesn't have the fuel. It doesn't have the capability to do that. And so it was always designed for low Earth orbit. So
exactly.
What we're looking at now are rockets that could do that, taking us back to the Apollo days with a capsule. And so you heard me talk about the size of the space shuttle. It was about 170,000 pounds compared to putting a capsule on the top of a vehicle. So we really didn't have the propulsive force to be able to transport that vehicle, the orbital vehicle, to orbit around the moon.
Well, Richard, as the good doctor has explained, it was a vehicle in low Earth orbit. You have a comment back as we go to our next caller. We'll give you one more opportunity if you have a comment.
Well, if I had designed it, that's what I would have done.
We appreciate your call. Hope you become part of this family as we talk here on this particular moment here on 77 WABC with a NASA astronaut who has lots to say. Let's continue the callers right now as we're on line 2. Let's say good morning to Detective Nolan, who's in Manhattan. Good morning, Detective. How are you, sir?
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
My question has to deal with long-term effects on the human body and being in space. Now, Yuri Gagarin being the first person in space, up until the last 2 astronauts that were brought back from the space station, what is the long-term effect physically on the human body after being in zero gravity?
It's a very good question.
Yeah, and you know, Detective, what you saw when Butch and Sonny came back, they were up there about 9 months. And so typically stays on the International Space Station are anywhere from 6 months to a year. And what happens is you lose minerals from the bone, and so your bones become very weak, and you have to be very careful. And so those astronauts really have to do resistive exercise for about 2 to 3 hours every day. They do cardiovascular training on a treadmill. They have a rowing machine. They have a bicycle. And they have to do that exercise to keep their muscle mass up and also to prevent minerals from leaching out and going into the blood, losing minerals from the bones.
That's amazing. Detective, you have a follow-up as we move through time and space here? I appreciate your call.
I was just curious, are there any plans to address those conditions, given the fact that the president and other people are thinking about going to Mars, which is a much, much longer time in space? Are there any other methods other than exercise, to allow humans to exist in zero gravity for, like, say, 2 years?
Thank you,
yeah,
Detective.
That's another very good point. And so, yeah, people have looked at ways of simulating gravity in space, centrifugally, spinning spacecraft and things like that to get partial gravity when you're going for long distances. But really, when we're talking about going back to the moon or going to Mars, what happens when you leave the magnetosphere of Earth is you lose that protection from cosmic radiation. And so the real threat to the human body when you're going long distances in space is galactic cosmic radiation, which affects the DNA. And then, of course, you have the single particle events from bursts happening on the surface of the sun, and those high energy protons and things basically could cause serious damage. And so to prevent that, looking at living for long periods of time on the surface of the moon, you really have to have a shelter of some sort to protect that bombardment from the radiation. And it's really the transit time that you don't have that protection that you really endanger. And so that's what the biggest concern is.
Detective, thank you for your call. Hope you'll become a regular, party and member of this family as we continue to talk about things otherworldly, and then someday return back to the topics of American exceptionalism, a very interesting subject. Let's say good morning once again as the callers continue to come in here on 77 WABC with this radio show, the Dr. Sky Experience. Let's say good morning to Frank in the great state of Maine. Good morning, Frank. How are you today?
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Always a pleasure. I'd like to ask the doctor if he ever experienced any type of anomaly in space, anything unidentifiable, anything that while he was in this shuttle that he can deem different than any space debris or anything that was man-made.
Well, actually, we had that's a very good question. We didn't see any debris. We didn't get hit with anything, but we did have some anomalies. There were 3 incidents that we had on our mission. Right during the launch, we struck a buzzard about 100 when we were traveling about 100 miles an hour, right as we passed the tower, which could have caused serious damage to the vehicle. We had a large piece of foam come off about 2 minutes into the flight, which could have caused damage and threatened the vehicle, just like what happened during Columbia. So we had a very near miss there. And then we had a piece of materials in 2 places sticking out at the belly of the vehicle. And we had to actually do an emergency spacewalk to repair the vehicle, to basically put an astronaut underneath the vehicle, pull those pieces of material. Otherwise, we would have burned up when we re-entered the Earth's atmosphere.
That's incredible, Doctor.
Yeah,
isn't that amazing, Frank? I mean, you hear these stories. This is amazing.
Totally amazing.
You want to follow up on that, Frank, before we move on? Go ahead.
Well, I understand those types of. I guess I would understand those types of incidents happening, considering that it was a man-made project. I'm talking about things that were unworldly or anything that was deemed different, like any, and I guess UFOs. I guess anything that you would deem like not of earthly value.
Right. That's what I thought you were getting at. I wasn't exactly sure, but no, I had no experience, no encounters, did not see anything that was otherworldly.
That's amazing. Frank, thanks for your interest, and we appreciate all the callers out there. Still time to get in as we move toward the bottom of the hour here to the hard break in just a few moments. 1-800-848-9222 if you're just joining us or listening, no matter where you are. A big world we have, right, Doctor, out there? This radio station's power is just beaming out all over and out into the cosmos. As we would say proudly here, your book, and we'll get into that too, because that's one of the big, tenets of this hour, is to talk about some of the things that you recommend, how the space, the agency with now a new director coming on board, the title of the book, that is Mission Out of Control, an Astronaut Odyssey to fix high-risk organizations and prevent tragedy. And what I want to do before we go to that, when we come back from the break, I just wanted to get the experience. This is something I think a lot of people want to know about, and maybe they're a little shy of asking, but I'll ask it anyway. The moment that you're lying there vertically, you're downstairs, in the mid-deck, I guess, on the right side, from what I see on the map here, of all the 7 individuals. Yep. You're strapped in. They put you in there. How long do you have to sit there, not knowing that the spacecraft is actually going to go? Because at the last minute, the whole mission could be scrubbed. And then what the heck is the feeling like when those motors fire up? I mean, what is that feeling like? Is there anything you can share with us?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, you're strapped in there. You're laying in that position as everything is getting ready. The vehicle's getting checked out. Things are finalized. And it's about 2.5 hours. You're laying on your back, pointed up, and you're just waiting, and you're counting down. And like I said, we heard the call out that there were birds circling on top of the vehicle.
Oh, my gosh.
And Eileen said, no, there's no way we're never going to hit them. The minute we light the engines, they're going to scatter, and then we hit the birds. But we didn't know that, of course. But the engines start up. You feel the vibration, and you're slowly gaining speed very rapidly. You start feeling the forces of the acceleration forces going. It pointed straight through your chest. And it feels when you reach about 3 Gs, which is the maximum accelerated force that you feel as you're going up. It feels almost like you have an adult sitting on your chest. It's that kind of pressure.
Oh.
Yeah. And then once the solid rocket mode is jettisoned, it becomes quiet. You hear the boom when the rockets fire and the SRBs, the solid rocket boosters, get jettisoned. And then it becomes quiet, the engines, as you're going, 6 more minutes, and then you hit orbit, and then you release the external tank, and then you're just floating. Once that happens, you're in orbit, and you come floating out of your seat, and you start going to work right away.
Better than any amusement park ride, I'm sure. Now, when I was at the Space Center years ago, they had that experience, the shuttle experience. And many people, I'm sure, listening have tried it. If you hadn't, it was a fairly good simulation, but I'm sure nothing like what you guys and gals went on. And it's amazing that this particular mission, Eileen Collins is what? She's the commander of that particular mission. So many things that we want to talk about, but more when we come back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about some of the tenets and some of the things that this particular astronaut has to offer in his book, Mission Out of Control. It's so important to hear this because what's happening, Doctor? We're looking at a new administrator with a congressional hearing, or has that been completed yet? Is that underway still?
It hasn't been completed. He has to return in a couple of days or a week. I can't remember exactly when he's going to be coming back to be finalized. It looks like things are going very well. It looks like he will be confirmed. But he has a big task in front of him because he comes to this not really understanding a lot of the history that went into where we are now today at NASA. And so he really needs to talk to the right people that understand what made NASA great 40, 50 years ago. Is that the right way to proceed going forward? How do we regain that culture that we lost, what I call a research culture? And how do we fix the problems we have now with the culture we have within the agency, where people are afraid to speak up when they see problems?
Well said, Doctor. We're coming up to that heartbreak at the bottom of the hour, as you folks know out there, and we appreciate you greatly here on this particular radio show, on this Powerhouse Radio Starship. We call it the Powerhouse 77 WABC. And thanks to our navigator, Tony, back there at the Ground Zero location, where he's making sure that all these watts are coming to you, of course, as they should. More when we come back here on the Dr. Sky Experience, heard everywhere, ladies and gentlemen, and still time for your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
And 32 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, we're rejoined here with our very special guest of this hour. We're talking with retired NASA astronaut, author of an outstanding book that we recommend everybody get out there, who obviously has an interest in not only the space program, but how organizations run to perfection, if there's such a word, entitled Mission Out of Control. Dr. Charles, you want me to call you Charlie, as you said to me when we talked off air, so I'll continue to do that if you don't mind. So
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the tenets in that book that you have now that people can purchase. Well, what's the main theme that you're trying to drive at?
Well, what I'm trying to drive at is we need to get back to our roots, what we did best. We were a research organization when we were NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. We were founded in 1917 after the First World War. And our mission then was to make our aircraft industry the tops in the world. And so we had 3 very small research centers that did applied research, and we transferred that research to industry to build up our industry partners. I think we need to go back to that model. We've become bloated. We've become a hierarchical, bureaucratic mess, and we're not innovative. We're risk averse, and we're not learning and failing, and we forgot how to fail. Instead of failing smart, fast, small, cheap, early and often, we're making large, not intelligent failures, I would say.
Let's continue with the callers. They rule here on the radio show, as they should. Let's say good morning to Joe in Queens. Your question to former NASA astronaut Charles Kamar. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I want to ask, you've been around a long time. Did you ever have the opportunity to meet Dr. Werner von Braun or any of those old Germans that worked on the original space program?
No.
And what were they like?
Well, no, Joe, I'm not that old, but I do know people that worked with von Braun, and he was a real leader, and I talk about him in my book. Von Braun started at the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, which became Marshall Space Flight Center, right? And he was of a group of Germans that we got after World War II with Operation Paperclip, and they were good engineers, very good engineers, and they like to do things hands-on. They like to take apart the engines that other people built, understood how they worked, and so they were very good. They were tops. He was a visionary. He was a leader, and he maintained a very psychologically safe environment. He encouraged people to speak up. And when engineers from NASA Langley suggested we should do lunar orbit rendezvous as the best way to go to the moon, as opposed to what his engineers were saying, he agreed. And so he was he easily conceded that, his idea wasn't the best. He saw the right way to go to the moon, and that was the reason why we beat the Russians to the moon, because of this disruptive engineer from Langley, John.
Wow,
Howell,
that's fascinating.
Said, yeah, and that was the reason. And he listened to those people.
Joe, I wanted to add something here. A long time ago, Doctor, I had this interview with a gentleman who put every single astronaut, I guess, in the old days, or maybe even into the past Apollo. It was a guy named Gunther Wendt. And he, Joe, was a person who knew, of course, Dr. Wernher von Braun and the entire scientists that came from the Peenemünde project. But that's obviously an interesting story. Joe, appreciate your call. Hope you'll join us and continue to be with this family as we grow. Let's continue with our callers. We have Don in Long Island. Good morning, Don. You're on with astronaut Charles Kamar. He calls himself Charlie.
Question. Yeah, I have a question. If you compare us to the early, compare now to the early explorers, I would say we're in the Columbus wind sails era. What are we doing to increase propulsion to get to Mars and places out there quicker? And that would save a lot of wear and tear on the body and enable us to, to move around a lot more.
Great question.
That is a great question. It's a very good point. And that's what I was getting at, Don. We should have been doing research on those advanced propulsion systems. We have been doing some, but we haven't been spending enough time doing that kind of research. And so those are some of the suggestions that me and a good friend of mine, Homer Hickam, have been making to the public, and hopefully it will get the attention of Jared Isaacman. We should be going and look at those types of engines, ion propulsion thrusters, nuclear propulsion systems, in order to get us there faster. And hopefully we can get back in the business of doing that kind of applied research. And that's definitely what we should be doing.
Homer Hickam's a great guy. We've talked to him in the past. That's good to hear, Doctor, that you're working with him. I appreciate it. Don, you have a follow-up before we move on? Go ahead, please.
No, that was my question, and I thank you for your answer.
Absolutely. The ball continues to roll here as we light the fires here on our rocket ship as we move out to space. We say good morning to Nick, calling us from Cincinnati, Ohio. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Good morning, Dr. Camarda. Pleasure to talk to you both. Just had a quick question about the status of a couple of NASA programs. One would be the Artemis program, and specifically the Artemis II mission. And also, what do you think will be going on with the Boeing Starliner after its issues the first time up, I should say?
Yeah, those are two very, very good questions, Nick. And as you know, those are the questions that if Jared Isaacman is confirmed, he's going to have to face. And Artemis has some serious problems, and I raised those issues on social media and got the attention of the administrator. He even called me up at home. I think they have serious problems with their heat shield. They changed it from the original Apollo design, which was Avcoat-filled honeycomb, and they went to a block Avcoat design. And when Artemis 1 went around the moon and came back and did an entry, they had some serious problems with large chunks of that heat shield coming off. And NASA's doing the same, exhibiting the same behaviors as it had during Challenger and Columbia, and they want to proceed with that same deviant design, and they want to use that for the next Artemis II mission and put crew on board without doing a flight test. And I don't think they understand the root cause of that problem, and they're going to have problems similar to problems Boeing's having. And this is the issue. We should have caught these problems before they flew Starliner. They had serious problems with the thrusters. Those thrusters, 5 of 28 thrusters failed. And if you read the article in ARS Technica that Butch Wilmore did with Eric Berger from ARS Technica, he really exposed how serious and how critical conditions were on Starliner before they docked. They did not have control of the vehicle, and if they did not regain control of the vehicle, they wouldn't have been able to dock, and they wouldn't have been able to come home. And so Boeing's having some of the same cultural issues as NASA, and you could change out the people at the top, but if you don't change the culture, they will continue to have these problems.
Thank you, Tony, for calling us from Cincinnati. I want to talk about, thank you, Nick from Cincinnati. The phone lines get very busy here. Let's go ahead and talk with line number 3. Let's say good morning to Tony out here in Phoenix, Arizona. Good morning, Tony. How are you today?
Yeah, doing just fine. Thank you, Dr. Sky. I'd like to talk to you guys, ask a question about, first of all, thank him for all of his thoughts and comments right now, but, pay tribute to him for being, one of the pioneers of, space conquest right now. But, sir, the way we see things going now with all the large rocket components, things like that, being able to not just fall into the ocean, but now being able to fly back and land to be reused again, where do you see this going? Is this like the next phase of like a large air freight system to be able to, move things into space even faster than before?
Great question.
Yeah, no, it is a great question. You're absolutely right. As a matter of fact, SpaceX has a contract with the military to basically transfer payloads from one point on the Earth to another point on the Earth using rockets. If you can imagine, instead of UPS, you'll be using rockets to take payloads across the pond in an hour, in very little time. And so we're looking at the next phase of space flight, just like we did with air flight, with commercial air transportation. We were transporting mail when we did early flights with airplanes, and now we're flying people. And so it's a natural kind of progression if you think about it.
Tony in Phoenix, appreciate your call, and we appreciate everyone as they become hopeful new members of this radio show and this big station, 77 WABC. We're almost up against that next break, Doctor, but I really want to go, when we come back, give you the opportunity. You have the floor, of course, to talk about really the things that you're talking about in Mission Out of Control. But briefly, in a couple of minutes, I know you can do this, what was the real causation of what happened with Challenger from all the research you've done here? Just give us, because I'm sure a lot of people wonder, what the heck happened on that day back in 1986?
On Challenger, a lot of people thought it was the O-ring, it was the temperature, it was a combination of things. Most importantly, what I talk about in my book is if you have the wrong teams looking at the anomaly, the people who were looking at the O-ring, they really did not understand the physics of the problem and the joint. And so their analysis of that joint, it was really that they didn't understand how that joint would behave under load. Their analysis was incorrect. They didn't have the right people. They didn't have the right analysis. And instead of the joint closing when it was loaded, when the engines lit off, those joints basically rotated and the gap opened up. And so, the O-ring played a point, but it was really a poorly designed structural joint in the segments of the SRB, solid rocket booster.
And they never should have launched in the cold weather, obviously. I mean, we keep reading about that. Or is that not really the issue? I mean, just simply...
Well, that was probably the thing that possibly caused it, but it was a faulty joint. It should never have been opening up. And they knew about it because they kept seeing blow-by in the O-ring. They would see one of the O-rings, the flow was getting past one of them, then it was getting past the other one. They saw soot in the O-rings. And so they saw this as a problem. This was deviant behavior. It wasn't supposed to perform like this, but they kept thinking that they understood the problem that they didn't. They should have stopped. They should have understood the real root cause of the problem, and they should have fixed the joint is what the problem was.
More with Dr. Charles Kamar and your calls. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we take this next break as we continue to move through time and space on the Dr. Sky Experience, his book, Mission Out of Control. We'll be right back after these important announcements.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay. With experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
I didn't think the pain from the shingles rash would affect simple, everyday tasks like bathing, getting dressed, or even walking around. I was wrong. Though not everyone at risk will develop it, 99% of people over the age of 50 already have the virus that causes shingles, and it could reactivate at any time. I developed it, and the blistering rash lasted for weeks. Don't learn the hard way, like I did. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Your snacking routine can get a little dull. Time for an Oikos remix. Like a crunchy storm of sea salt praline pretzels, dark chocolate, and butter toffee, showering down into a smooth, creamy yogurt. Enjoy 3 Oikos Remix varieties with epic mix-ins and 11 grams of complete protein per 4.5-ounce serving. See RemixYogurt.com.
So good, so good, so good. Great gifts for mom? We've got them. And they're up to 60% off at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
You know they have Marc Jacobs? Gotta show mom some love.
That is so good. Snag amazing deals on Mother's Day gifts from Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade New York, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
We're shipping Mother's Day gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes. My gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it?
Yes.
Guarantee it?
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Woo!
Visit the upsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
At 46 minutes after the hour, we're continuing to the top of the hour, as you would expect. Special guest always here on the Dr. Sky Show, retired NASA astronaut Charles Kamar. He likes to be called Charlie. And we're taking your calls, but also trying to give him the last 5 minutes, if not more, to talk about some of the main themes in a book that we highly recommend out there. Let's now go to the callers. Let's say on line 5, let's welcome Bill in Huntington. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Hello. In the 80s, I think all the astronauts, they trained to spacewalk, right?
That's correct.
But not many of them did it. Did you ever do it?
No, I did not have the opportunity to do a spacewalk, but we all trained for that. And so we're kind of cross-trained in case we needed to do that on a mission, right? But they select the ones for a particular mission. On my particular mission, I was flying the robotic arm.
That's interesting, because Stephen Robinson, I guess, was the person, right? Is that correct, Doctor? He was the spacewalker, at least one of them, I think, on that mission.
Right, Steve Robinson and Soichi Noguchi on my mission. And so when we had to do that emergency EVA, Steve Robinson was the one that was underneath the belly of the vehicle with his foot in the space station robotic arm, and he basically pulled the pieces of material out from the belly of the vehicle. And so he did the hero spacewalk that saved the day.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you, Bill in Huntington. We appreciate your call. And I want to do this right now, Doctor, if you don't mind, giving you the opportunity before the clock runs out to just give us some important things that are in Mission Out of Control. Obviously, people would want to get the book, but tell us, all your research, what's the view of what NASA should be doing in the future in summary? Is what it's done in the past maybe not right?
Absolutely. And so I spent about 18 years researching the real cause of the problem was the culture. And I talk about in the first half of the book just how bad NASA has gotten. And I have to go into detail because people wouldn't believe that, the shining city on the hill could be that bad. The second half of the book is the 18 years I spent really trying to understand how we fix this problem. How do we transform these dysfunctional cultures like NASA, like Boeing, like we're seeing right now? And I think the way to do it is going back to a research kind of culture and building networks of teams instead of having a hierarchical command structure in a bureaucracy, but basically have a flat organizational structure, linking the right researchers, the people with the knowledge, with the people that are trying to solve these anomalies as they come up. And we could use actually artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand when we see bad behaviors, whether it's bad technical behaviors and people are making bad decisions without the right knowledge, or when people aren't allowing people to speak their voice, to use their voice when the culture is not psychologically safe. And so I think that's a good use of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
Exactly. Good summary. But before the clock runs out, I just want to see, and I'd certainly see and ask you, obviously, if you'd return sometime in the future to update us on more of the things that are happening at NASA. We've enjoyed this. You're obviously very popular, and I'm trying to see as many callers as we can get to go to the top of the hour. Let's go to line one with Frank. Good morning. Are you with us? And your question, please.
Yes, thank you. Doctor, I believe in intelligent life elsewhere. Is gravity going to dictate what they look like on different planets?
I have absolutely no idea. Do I think there's intelligent life? I think it's definitely a possibility, given what we know of the universe.
Do you think that gravity is going to dictate what they look like, though? In other words, what we look like here on Earth, if gravity was different, we would look a lot different, wouldn't we?
I would assume so. The environmental conditions plays definitely a major role, but that's definitely outside my wheelhouse, Frank.
Let's go and say, well, thank you, Frank, for calling. I'm sorry to cut you short there. We just want to try to go to as many people, and I do thank you for giving us a call. Let's go to line number 2. We have Joaquin. Good morning, and your question or comment, please.
Good morning, Dr. Scott. Good morning, Charlie. Okay, my comment is this, my question. When it comes to our educational system and our universities and the DEI admissions policies, are they basically stopping a lot of our brighter minds who could be Caucasian and Asian American and keeping them out while putting people in under DEI and basically putting out worthless diplomas while at the same time we take students from foreign countries, potentially our enemies and adversaries, and educate them in our sciences and technologies?
That's a very good question and a very big issue. And I spent a lot of time working in education. I think we'd have to do a lot better in our educational system. I think we have to democratize education so everyone gets access to exceptional education. And I think we should select the best people we need for the job. And that's the way we're going to get ahead. That's the way we're going to win in this country, not based on what someone looks like. It should be a fair and open competition as long as everyone has access to quality education. And I hope this administration does something about that. We talk about it a lot, but it's a big issue, and I think it's a very important issue.
Well, thank you, Frank. Let's continue with the callers, as many as we can get. Let's go to line 3. We have Robert in Suffolk. Good morning. You're on with retired NASA astronaut and very active in the conversation, Dr. Charles Kamar. Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Is there a viable MHD closed-loop generator for space travel or even a terrestrial generation?
I do not have any knowledge about that. I know people were talking about an EM kind of propulsion system, which has no actual mass particles coming out of it, but I think that's yet to be proven. I think they called it an EM generator. I did not know of the MHD. Is that what you said, or MHG?
I'm not sure what he said.
MHD, it's magnetohydrodynamic.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, magnetohydrodynamics, people have been looking at that as ways to to basically provide orientation of the vehicle as you're flying the vehicle, because you have ionized particles in front of the vehicle. But I have not heard that as a propulsion system. We have been looking at ion thrusters, if that's what you're talking about.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, you're correct. But magnetothermal hydrodynamics is also part and parcel to a lot of the things with fusion reactors, too. So if you could get that energy, right, gentlemen, out of that particular focus point of source of energy, you would have probably, an unlimited source of energy for, however you could talk about it cosmically. But that is something on the drawing boards that Doctor and myself, I think we'll have to take a pass on that one, right? At least for now. That's a big one. Let's see who we haven't talked to. Let's go to line 1. We think we have Frank in the Bronx. Did we get to you, Frank? And if you're there, good morning. Okay, I'm sorry. Fred on line 4. Good morning, Fred. Go ahead, please.
Dr. Sky, do we have any idea what causes gravity?
Well, we really don't know that, and I can only give you this much. Gravity is actually another force of nature, which people do not understand. It's probably beyond that of what we talk about the time. It's interlaced with the fourth dimension, time, and we really don't understand what it is. But if you stay tuned for the next hour, we can explore this, and maybe you can call us back on this. It's not a way for me to cut you short. It's just that it's part of the fourth dimension, which is also part of time. So time and gravity are intertwined into one. And I think the good doctor would agree on that, right?
I'll have to concede, Dr. Sky.
Okay. Anyway, this is so amazing. We have you here, and I do appreciate this. Doctor, this is interesting. So when you're up there in space, I've never done this. I don't know at my age. I'm 69 years young. I consider myself in healthy status. But the point of the matter is, we have astronauts like John Glenn, who went up, I think, in his 70s, obviously the first American to orbit. But the truth of the matter is, that experience on the International Space Station, what's that like? Because most people do not understand that, because they never could get there. What's it like?
Well, first of all, Dr. Sky, you may not know this, but a good friend of mine and a classmate, Don Pettit, is in orbit right now. He's 69 years old. Mm-hmm. He spent a total of over 400 days in space, so he's the oldest active astronaut to ever fly in space, and he's just an amazing individual. He should be returning home probably in a couple of weeks on the Soyuz capsule.
Great information. Another one from me that boggles my mind is, how do you even sleep up there? And I've heard rumors or stories, I don't know how true they are, that even when you close your eyes at night, some astronauts have detected these visual sensations like little cosmic rays, of course, hitting your retina. So even in the darkness, well, what's it like to sleep up there first? Talk about that.
Yeah, you do get those little flashes of light occasionally when you're sleeping. But I had no problem sleeping in space. You tie yourself off and you just float there. And so I was very comfortable sleeping. Some people have issues. Some people have back problems. But I didn't have any problem at all as a rookie. I did great in space. I loved it.
Wow. And as one astronaut that you and I both talked about, Story Musgrave, I think he's probably, according to records, one of the smartest astronauts, more PhDs, more master's degrees. He came here to Arizona, Dr. Kamar, and we sat at a golf resort, and I had a chance to interview him, and I asked him to tell me what the experience of space is like. And here's what he said, and I quote, "Space is delicious," end quote. And I couldn't understand that until later. It must be one hell of an experience, right? That most of us do not know, if only 680-some humans have ever gone up into space at this point. And that's a tiny number compared to what the population so far. So
very tiny number. We need more people to have that experience, and that's how we'll ensure we have more innovation, more breakthroughs, and make space safer and affordable for more people.
Absolutely, and they're doing it. I think Elon and Jeff Bezos is doing it well. So if you were to pay for his little suborbital flight, are you really then considered an astronaut? Because I've heard quickly that the definition of space is 50, and then some say 60 miles. So do you get the classification of astronaut if you do the Bezos suborbital?
Yeah. A lot of people say that, and I know Eileen Collins, my commander, put up a definition for what an astronaut is in order to be in an astronaut Hall of Fame or the astronaut memorial. And it's really, it's a profession. So it's someone that works their life and as a career and does work in space. really. And so it's more viewed as a profession. It's kind of like if you fly in an airplane, you're not a pilot, of that sort. So they are having this experience. We call them astronauts, 50 miles to 62 miles, whatever
yes.
the delineation is. It doesn't make a difference.
Wow, you've been there. We haven't, and we appreciate your time. And hopefully you'll come back on this particular archive as we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, and proud to do so here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Former NASA astronaut Charles J. Kamar, he likes to be referred to as Charlie. And one more time, his book, Mission Out of Control, an Astronaut Odyssey to Fix High-Risk Organizations and Prevent Tragedy. Good for many people out there. In addition, Doctor, getting their MBA in business, a nice read-along, I think, to help them as future managers in the space program, and we wish Jared Isaacson the best to become, hopefully, the next NASA administrator. Hope you'll come back, sir, and I thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sky. Will do.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we approach the top of hour number 1, stay tuned. Hour number 2, we keep the subject matter the same, pretty much on the same lines, but this time we venture deep out into space, and we'll be talking with a gentleman who has become a very good friend of mine. His name is Charles Heico. He has a great resume, and he also has a great knowledge, cosmic knowledge, that we'd like to share with each and every one of you, and we'll do our update on what you can actually see during the Passover and Easter holidays. We'll be right back after the important commercial announcements here on 77 WABC.
Think about how much time you spend at home. Does your home really make you feel great? If not, it's time to change it. Now picture yourself coming home, seeing beautiful new furniture from Jordan's. Eating out or a vacation, those things just come and go. But walking into your room and loving what you see, you'll enjoy that every day. Right now, come to Jordan's Furniture and get 15% off everything, or get up to 60 months with no interest.
Call 1-866-245-4722 for financing details. Restrictions apply. Subject to credit approval.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Welcome to hour number 2. At 6 minutes after the hour, we continue to move through time and space with the show, if you're new to listening to us here on 77 WABC. The Dr. Sky Experience, speaking with you, not at you, about the great subjects of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather. Shifting gears to celebrity guests of importance that I'm sure you would love to hear about and ask questions of, and then stories of American exceptionalism, truth, justice, and the American way, as you hear a main theme here on this radio station for many hours a day, and proud to say it. As we continue, ladies and gentlemen, a conversation now with a very special guest, as all of our guests are important. Well, now welcome to the microphone, Carl Heico. He's a retired Air Force flight engineer. He has a doctorate in science humanities from Rutgers University, and he's the past president of an organization that we both found each other. This is so strange before this interview, that I was a member of when I was like 13 years of age, right in the New Jersey area, called the Amateur Astronomers Incorporated at Union County College in Cranford, New Jersey. And he, Dr. Heico, had an opportunity to use the Hubble Space Telescope to look at something very interesting in space, and he talks with us from his home somewhere in the great state of New Jersey. Good morning, Carl. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Fine. How are you? And thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that.
I appreciate your time. And I also want to mention you can find out more, as Carl will tell us. He does an exceptional podcast of his own called Carl's Orbit. You know, we met by chance. Isn't this interesting? You were listening to the show, and you talked about this, and you said, you know, I have a lot of experience in the subjects that we're going to talk about. And I said, hey, let me be a good listener. And I was a good listener, as we are right now. But it's also amazing that when I was just a young boy, way back there in New Jersey, proud to be from the New York area, we were members of a group that you have a lot to say about, a group called Amateur Astronomers Incorporated at Union County College. Talk about the legacy of this, because that's where I got my start to learn how to even use the thing we'll talk about called a telescope. What a great place.
Yes, it is, as a matter of fact. And, I came across that place in a strange way. I just went there to visit. I've had some background in being exposed to some areas of astronomy, but nothing really in depth. Went there, and all of a sudden, this was during the summer season. So there were people outside with their telescopes, the amateur astronomers. I went there, and I saw them with their telescopes, and they gave me a chance to look through some of their telescopes. And in the meantime, there were these two big domes that were working with telescopes in them, making noise as they moved around. And gee, I was really kind of impressed by all of this.
And so was I. Yeah, it looked like a big giant machine like you see in planetariums. So it's amazing because go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, quite impressed is right. Wow. So here I was going from amateur astronomer with their telescope to amateur astronomer, and they showing me various kinds of objects in the sky. The ones that were closer, the planets that were visible, the deep sky objects. And this one guy had this small, I think I mentioned at previous times, had a white kind of small Newtonian telescope. And he's swinging this thing around, and here's this object, and here's that object. And wow, I was really impressed. I said, I have to do this. So I did. I joined them, and that was interesting kind of part of my life because I really got involved. I got the passion. I caught the bug. And wow, did I get involved.
Yeah. No, you have it, Carl. And I want to do this in this hour with your okay. And I think the listeners I think they'll get a lot out of this. I want to talk about light pollution in big cities. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona. We're the 5th largest city in America. New York City, of course, Chicago, Philadelphia, all these big cities. They're all plagued with light pollution. And I get this from a lot of people that say, I can't see anything with all those lights. And that's why I have you on here, because I want you to share with the positive side of this whole equation that people can actually see things amazing. I mean, you have that amazing big, the big skyscrapers when you have the sun, the Manhattan Henge, when the sun is setting right down those east-west streets. But in the nighttime, just let's go to it. You can still see a heck of a lot of things at night, and you don't necessarily have to have one of these telescopes that cost you, gajillion dollars. Talk to us about the popularity of this, even from lighted areas. I want to hear about that from you.
Well, even at night, as a matter of fact, all you need really is a pair of binocs or just your naked eye. Look at the moon. You can project the sun through a pair of binoculars and a telescope. Of course, you can't look at it. And as you project it, you can follow the movement of the sunspots across the sun as you enlarge the projection of the sun. And then when there's an eclipse, which there is occasionally, we had one recently, you can project that eclipse onto a piece of paper or whatever you want to project it on by having it being projected through a pair of binocs or a telescope. And you can do that during the daytime in an area that's polluted. But also, too, you say you don't want to spend so much money, but I think I would invest in some kind of filters. And they do have filters, as you probably know, that filter out various kinds of pollutants in the air.
They do. I wanted to appeal to many people, all the listeners out there across the nation, around the world. Let's say you have children or grandchildren. What is the most amazing thing? Many things you can do to help children. They have STEAM and STEM programs in schools. But I want to appeal to those people out there and say, if you have a question about anything we're talking about, and if you're just joining us, what are we talking about? We're talking with Charles Heico. He obviously has a specialization. He obviously has his own PhD in this particular subject of astronomy and science and humanities. But even more important than those things, for the average people out there, and many people want to get involved in this particular subject, a hobby, whatever. Let's go to the phones at 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222, which stands simply, as you probably know, WABC. So, Carl, this is interesting. Let's start off with the basics here. If somebody has these different questions, 3 types of devices that I want to talk about. The old school refractor telescope. What's that? And since radio is the theater of the mind, this long tube that has a lens up at the very front and a long tube where you put it on a tripod and you look at the bottom end and you put a little eyepiece in there. That's an interesting telescope, but unfortunately so many of the larger refractors are just so overpriced. I mean, most people can't afford a 6-inch refractor that costs $5,000. So the benefits of a refractor are what? You can see planets better, maybe a better focal length, and we'll talk all about this. It gets a little technical. What's your opinion of the refractor for people out there?
Well, the refractor, as you mentioned, is a very long telescope that involves lenses. And as a result, it's got to be long because it's not reflecting light back and forth as it would, making the tube shorter as in a reflecting telescope. So as a result, it's longer, and the more power you'd like to have and the more aperture, which is more important than power, by the way. Aperture is the thing that you're looking for. As you make the aperture larger, of course, the tube has to extend longer. And that's what the problem is. So as a result, people are going to the reflecting telescope. And, Dr. Sky, it's really not that expensive in terms of, say, for example, going to a Dobsonian type of reflector. That might be a table model.
Yes. And let's define these terms, because we also have, obviously, a conversation that seems maybe to many people to say, oh, my gosh, they're talking about all these technical things. How am I ever going to understand this? And by the outcome of this hour, I'm hoping that we will be, succeeding in giving people at least information that, how do I say this in the simplest way? I always laugh about this. The most orphaned telescopes are found where? And people say to me, what are you talking about? I'm talking about telescopes that were given during the holidays, let's say to a child or even some adults. You know what the answer is? The Goodwill.
Closet. It's in a
closet. Or the closet in the
attic.
Goodwill. Right. And people say, wait a minute, I gave a telescope away. I don't know how to use the thing. So that's the whole concept here. How do you utilize this? But without getting overly technical, the refractor is the long tube with the lens in the front. The bigger that lens would be, the price goes up literally, no pun intended, astronomically. And now we're talking about reflector telescopes with this big open tube with a mirror at the bottom. And you were defining something called Dobsonian telescopes, and these are relatively inexpensive. And I encourage people, we're not selling one here in this particular show, but I recommend people check out the term Dobsonian telescopes, right, Doctor? That you basically have just a very simple box. It looks like a home-built box at the bottom, and it goes up and down and sideways. And boy, you can buy one of those for a relatively low, a low price, considering $400 or $500, and you can have a heck of a lot of fun. Agree?
Oh, certainly. As a matter of fact, one of the major companies that sells them is Orion, and that's advertised almost everywhere, as a matter of fact. So it might be an idea maybe to pick up some kind of catalog or go online, find out what kind of telescopes they have, get familiar with what types of telescopes there are and what the prices are. That would be the best way. But don't buy a telescope that, as you say, would be placed in a closet or somewhere else hidden, not used at all, and just wasted.
Right, and it might be a good deal if you go to the Goodwill, because the person who had it before you may not. That's the reason that they probably dropped it off. Let's go to the callers. You're lighting up the phone lines, as we can expect. On line one, let's say good morning to Dominic, deep in the heart of where? In New Jersey, I assume. Good morning, Dominic.
Yes, sir. First time. Really happy to be here and listen to all your guests today, Dr. Sky. And I just had a quick question now that you guys are on telescopes. I've just always been amazed on what telescopes can show us, especially in the ones like, the Hubble. And I was just wondering how astronomers decide where to point the telescope, since space is so huge. Do they, especially for the Hubble, do they already know what they're looking for? Do they ever just scan the sky or just end up finding something completely unexpected? And with new telescopes being built, will we able to see parts of the universe we've never seen before? How often are we discovering things?
Dominic, stay with us, because you've asked a lot of good things. Go ahead, Carl. Sorry to cut you short.
No. Yes to both questions. As a matter of fact, just like on Earth, we have longitude and latitude to give us direction in terms of coordinates pointing to a certain spot. So if you know the longitude and you know the latitude, you know where that spot is on our planet. Well, if we project that into space, into a kind of a hypothetical globe in space, a celestial globe, you may call it, and if we project the Earth's coordinates onto the globe, in not the same way, because, of course, it isn't the Earth, but in a way where we have the names given to those coordinates that enable us to locate something. And the names of those coordinates would be right ascension and declination. Declination is like the latitude on Earth.
Correct.
And right ascension is like the longitude on Earth. And we use those coordinates then Scientists know, for example, the astronomers know if they're looking for a certain object in the sky, they look up the coordinates. What right ascension is it? What declination is it? Once they find that out, they give it either to some kind of technician who works for them while they stay in a room during the winter, being nice and warm with their computer, getting the information.
Carl, you're absolutely right, because now modern astronomy, they're sitting, as we went to the Flagstaff Observatory called Discovery Channel, a 175-inch monster telescope that's about 100 feet tall in a building 7 stories tall. And yes, they're using right ascension and declination, but they're not looking through an eyepiece. And I know, Dominic, you'll get a kick out of this, I'm sure, because they're sitting down in a warm room. You're so right, Doctor, that what are they doing? They're imaging. So these telescopes today, the big ones, if anybody wants to be an astronomer, you're probably Doctor? More of a computer technician and a computer person than you would be a visual observer, correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Not many people realize it, but there are more amateur astronomers that know the names of the constellations in the sky, where they're located relative to each other by naked eye.
You're right. That's a lost art, in my opinion. But Dominic, you still with us? I just want to know if you're still there.
I am, I am. Yeah. And any time that I, start learning about what I'm seeing, whenever I look into that telescope, I'm kind of lost. But I do have a follow-up question.
Yeah, go ahead. That's why I asked.
This is all really cool. So since I was a little boy, I've always asked, some of these questions that were kind of far out there. But so if we keep building, Dr. Sky, and if we keep building more advanced telescopes, do you think there's a point where we'll just hit a limit, like a point where we just can't see any further, no matter how powerful our equipment gets? And if so, what causes that limit? The technology or something about the universe itself?
Well, Carl, I'm going to jump in on that, too, and I want to hear your final answer on this to Dominic. That with the James Webb Telescope, we're peering back almost, right, to the point of 13.7 billion, years in time and space. So probably the answer on that is, no matter how big the optic device you have, let's say you had one 3 miles across, like the telescope like James Webb has 21 feet of a mirror surface with many mirrors. The answer to that, the blockage or the end, is where the universe started. So theoretically, you'd be going almost back to the beginning of time. Doctor, your comment on that, too. You may want to dig deeper into that one. I think it's also a good question.
Well, going back to, as you say, the beginning of the universe, the Big Bang. But there's different ideas now that are being introduced in terms of whether or not there really was a Big Bang. Maybe there were several Big Bangs, things of that nature. And you might want to look this up. Name is Dominic, right? Dominic?
Yes, that's the caller, Dominic. Yes.
Hey, you may want to look this up because there's a lot of other ideas now that the theoretical astrophysicists are coming up with. And so it's interesting to get into information of that sort, and you can get that information online or on your phone, as a matter of fact. So you asked about how far back can you look. Well, if there is only one Big Bang, some people believe it came from a big hole, by the way. That's another idea.
Correct.
And as light approaches that, everything begins to move slower. And so the wavelengths of light, I would imagine, are affected by that as it approaches whatever the singularity is, what they call the center of the Big Bang, how it was supposedly started in the first place. But I guess the bottom line is that you'll never really get to the beginning of the universe in terms of viewing through a telescope of any sort, whether it's a telescope that is set up to access other forms of light energy, other forms of the electromagnetic spectrum, say, for example, infrared, ultraviolet, gamma radiation, X-ray, and so forth. So you have to talk about what kind of light the telescope is getting. Like, for example, you mentioned the James Webb. Well, the James Webb is getting information in the infrared which is
that
a
is
long
correct.
way.
It's not just an optical telescope, right?
Yes,
it's an infrared device. But I want to say thank you to Dominic. I appreciate your call and hope you'll join and become part of this family as we talk about other worldly things and also talk about things that are in the news from space, astronomy, weather, and all the things that make what, Doctor, the heavens an enjoyable subject, even for people who live in light-polluted areas, to give them hope that they can see things. So, Dominic, thank you for the call and hope you'll join us on future programs. And, Doctor, let me go back to a caller that we had in the previous hour. I don't know if you were listening to the radio at the time, but somebody asked what basically defines gravity, and that wasn't the exact words, but simply this, and I think people need to know this, that Einstein really talked about this, and many people maybe missed it, and no fault of their own, that simply gravity is the warpage of space-time. So what is that, if you really get into a conversation of that? So that if you look at everything, let's say that you had this trampoline, and you had two different weights, like two balls, one's 40 pounds and one's 20 pounds. That much of that rubber sheet or the trampoline that gets pulled down, that in essence is a description of how that whole space-time bending occurs. So gravity, what, Doctor, is really just a representation, complicated as it is. Not everybody really knows this, nor do the greatest scientists, that gravity is just a component of the warp. It is the warpage of space-time, correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, what's being introduced now is the possibility of carriers for gravity called gravitons.
Mm-hmm.
It's hypothetical. Yes. It has not been found yet. It's hypothetical. And in the meantime, what they're doing is they're able to record gravity waves being produced by stars exploding at a distance, supernovae. They can pick up the gravitational waves from those stars that are exploding in. And, for example, maybe galaxies colliding or something of that nature. There's all kinds of things like that going on in outer space. Amazing things, amazing.
You're right. And I want to jump in here with a quote from the famous Carl Sagan, and here it goes, and I quote, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it's a profound source of spirituality," end quote. Carl Sagan, of course, an interesting individual that obviously his roots back into the New York area, Cornell University, and so many things, a man who passed, so suddenly and way before his time, but I guess it was his time. But we always think about that, Doctor, as we move out into time and space, that many, many people today are even saying that beyond this whole subject of quantum physics, we're talking about even smaller entities or particles, maybe they're matter, I don't know, called strings, and that there may be many, as you referred to, multiverses, not just a Big Bang, but there may be 10, 20 different planes of dimensions out there. And that's why we do this radio show. It's about opening our minds to the strange, the unique, and what many people think are impossible. So before we go to our break in just a little while, the hard break, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about giving us the hope of people that are viewing the nighttime sky in the big cities. We didn't really get to talk about binoculars. Give us a little expose on the necessity for those, and obviously that's a good thing to have in my mind.
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, they can be used to observe the sky at night in an urban area or in the country, wherever it might be. It's hard, of course, in an urban area. We know that. And I mentioned the idea of possibly purchasing some kind of filters that would filter out the pollution. There's two things to consider when you're considering the quality of air. You think of the idea of transparency, where the atmosphere is clear, so you can see with clarity stars, for example. And there's also the other component of measuring the quality of the atmosphere, and that would be, besides transparency, seeing. Seeing has to do with how much particles are in the sky, pollution, for example, in the atmosphere, or maybe the amount of water vapor, so the humidity. So these two major kind of factors have got to be taken into consideration when you talk about viewing the sky, whether it's from the
You're so right, Doctor. You're so right.
Maybe, yeah. And but anyway, you have the filters, and also you have the larger object, Venus. You can't miss Venus. I mean, Venus is.
Oh my gosh! It's like an airplane floodlight, right, in the sky. Right.
And also, too, not many people may realize those who are not into astronomy, that Venus goes through phases like the moon. Wow, that's fantastic. You can see those phases.
Totally amazing. And on a lighter note, I wanted to say this so everybody out there doesn't think that we're just science geeks. Any guy that's courting a lady or has a loving wife or whatever you have in your life, it could be the other way around. And I say this to the love of my life, Diana. I'll look at the sky and she'll say, oh, and we'll look at the sky. Oh, that star twinkles so beautiful. Hold the phone. The science geek was going to say, right, Carl? No star twinkles because the atmosphere scintillates, and that's what makes the star twinkle. But guess what I say? I've come to become conditioned in this. You know, honey, when I say to Diana, every star twinkles. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a good way to get out of trouble? I thought that was cute.
Say, and you twinkle, my dear, as well.
There you go. So much more to talk about here. You know, if you have questions, 1-800-848-9222. Rare opportunity to talk with people, of course, that have the know here in these subject matters on the Dr. Sky Experience. And just a little sneak peek into next week, ladies and gentlemen. You know, very sadly, on a somber note, the loss of all those individuals, of course, tragically killed in the helicopter crash in the New York area along the Hudson River. Our thoughts and prayers, of course, and deeper than that, go out to those souls. May they rest in peace. But along the line of things that have happened next week in the world of aviation disasters, how about this? Legendary drummer Artemis Pyle. I've known him for years from the legendary band Leonard Skinner. He's going to tell us about the horrible airplane crash that the band experienced back in 1977. I call Artemis Pyle a hero, his story, and so much more. And then in our next hour, second hour of next week, that's what we're hoping, to talk about the founders of the largest UFO conference of people all over the world called Contact in the Desert. We'll be speaking with the organizer and owner of such an event. So if you're interested in what goes above in the nighttime sky, whether it be drones, UFOs, and the whole story of ufology, I think you'll want to stay in touch with us. But right now, we go to the heartbreak at the bottom of the hour here on the Dr. Sky Experience, 1-800-848-9222. We'll be happy to take your calls with our special guest, Dr. Carl Heico.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
At Capella University, you can learn at your own pace with our FlexPath learning format. Take 1 or 2 courses at a time and complete as many as you can in a 12-week billing session. With FlexPath, you can even finish the bachelor's degree you started in 22 months for $20,000. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu. Fastest 25% of students. Cost varies by pace, transfer credits, and other factors. Fees apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Shirley McLean. I am having a wonderful time talking to Dr. Sky. Since I've spent a lot of my time looking up, I love to discuss what is underneath. And always remember to keep your eyes to the sky.
The nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, and the carbon in our apple pies were made from collapsing stars. We simply are made of star stuff. A quote from the great Carl Sagan. 34 minutes after the hour, we continue with our very special guest. All guests are special on the Dr. Sky Experience, as we're rejoined by Dr. Carl Heico. He's talking with us about great things that go on above our heads from his experience. But first, let's go to our callers. Let's say good morning to Dave in Lockport, New York, way up there on the other side of New York State. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing, Steve? Good morning.
Good morning.
I've spoken to you a couple times in the last couple of years. I asked you a few things. Congratulations on your own show.
Thank you for that, sir.
Yeah, I know you've been here, so the one thing that I always ask you is, did you ever read Nerves by Lester Del Rey? But
the answer was no, and I must apologize, but I'm a man of truth. There you go.
Yep. Well,
go ahead.
I think you'd like it. But anyway, my main question is, what do you think is the feasibility of establishing a moon colony, a self-sustaining moon colony, and how long do you think it would take? I mean, I know the obvious power we could do with solar panels. I don't know what the moon dust and rocks are made out of. I don't know if there's any moisture. I'm sure there's plenty of minerals.
Yes.
I'm sure there's probably not any biological matter. But, you know, that can all be supplied. And
so let's have Carl go ahead and answer his side of it, and then I'll come back with my interpretation, too. Equally important, both of us. Go ahead, Carl.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Sky. As a matter of fact, I belong to the National Space Society, and their idea, their mission, is to explore, develop, and settle in space to make us a spacefaring civilization. And as a result, they're trying to promote that idea by visiting members of Congress, maybe several times a year in different ways. And the point being that plans are being made to establish these settlements on the moon, and they're hoping on Mars. Now, I think it's better if they establish it first on the moon personally, because that way they'll get experience being in space in conditions where there's much in the way of radiation and also
microgravity. It also gives you a jump-off spot.
It sure does, Dave. You're right. But, you know, here's something interesting, too. I don't know if both of you know this, and I just read this today, so it's got some credence, but not 100% because we read it on the Internet. The Chinese are developing a project when they land a spacecraft on the moon. They've made successful landings, as we both know, on the, quote, far side, not the dark side, the far side. That's Pink Floyd stuff the other way. But what they've done seriously is developed a spacecraft that will utilize, get a load of this, the entire lunar soil to create as almost if you had this big pressure machine that can actually take the ingredients and make what they call moon bricks out of that. I know it sounds crazy to some people. They're going to be able to crush the lunar soil, but it does have a consistency that when it's added, you know, with something, I'm not a person who knows how to do masonry, but isn't that interesting, Dave and Doctor? That's a fascinating concept to help build lunar structures on the moon, to answer your question, Dave.
Well, it is. I'm not concerned about the structures. I'm thinking more about the practicality of oxygen and hydrogen to make water.
Oh, okay.
We can send pressurized capsules up there temporarily, and as far as the biomatter, we could do that and recycle our waste and all that. But I just wondered what the consistency or what the components of the moon dust are and the moon rocks. If we drill down, is there the components of water there? That would make it a lot easier. As far as the energy, I mean, you got the sun, solar panels, and all that. But, I mean, a self-sustaining thing, you know, with a hydroponic garden or whatever, and, you know, make it so it's self-sufficient. And how long do you believe that would take?
Well, I'll answer it this way and give Doctor the final word on this, too, and then we got to move on. You know, I don't think we're doing anything like this, Dave, in the next 20 to 30 years, and I'm being serious, for any large-scale habitation on the moon. I mean, we simply have to get back there. I say this way in summary, let's not rush this. In other words, let's do it right. You know, there's no more moon race, or some people say the Chinese are going to beat us there. Let's get real. To build the kind of habitation that you need to be really reusable on the surface of the moon, in my opinion, is maybe a decade, if I'm even more optimistic. Doctor, your final comment, and Dave, thank you for the call. I appreciate your kind words and hope you'll be a regular part of this family. Thank you.
Oh, I love listening to you. I'm glad you got your own show.
Well, thank you for the kind words.
I'll listen on the radio.
Yes, I want Carl to respond back and give him his equal time here, too. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, insofar as the availability of water, there is water, but not below the surface or in the form of liquid water. There's ice that's hidden in some of the craters on the moon. As a matter of fact, that's what the Chinese intend to do, to land at the South Pole of the moon in order to access that water that's there. There seems to be more there than any place else on the moon so far, anyway.
That's
where
incredible.
the water is. That's
You're
where
right.
they want to set up settlements next to these bodies of ice.
You know, this is interesting for everybody listening around the nation, around the world. This is interesting, Carl. We were talking to some of the astronauts in space, the pioneers that developed the spacecraft, and they were talking about the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which, by the way, not a, shameless plug for the people in Arizona. Arizona State University monitors, along with NASA, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which is images many people may know or may not, the actual landing sites of the Apollo. But they found, this is interesting, they actually were the first to really detect what you're talking about here, that you see water ice on the surface of the south pole of the moon. So that's the coldest, listen to this, folks, the coldest place in the solar system is not way out by Uranus, Neptune, and I don't like to say dwarf Pluto. That's another story. I call it planet Pluto.
Yes.
But isn't that interesting, Carl, that the coldest place in the solar system is at the lunar pole, a temperature allegedly recorded, and this is accurate, about minus 413 below zero Fahrenheit. How about that?
That's quite interesting, and that's amazing that the water can exist there at all, as a matter of fact. But
That's
under
totally
those conditions, I suppose it could.
So maybe what Dave is talking about, in the future, the habitation modules would be built. But I don't think, what do you think? I don't think this is going to happen anytime, maybe within 10 years. And I'm being really optimistic. I said even longer for regular habitation places on the moon. What say you on that? That's maybe not unfair to ask you. Why not?
You're destroying my expectations, Dr. Sky.
There you go. And a lot of other people's, maybe. There you go.
Yeah. It's going to be a while, I'm sure, because it requires money. And also, it requires the will to do so. That's me.
Well, it's a big, you have to have a big chunk of change in your pocket to do it. So it has to be a national goal, which I don't think will be refocused. President Trump, of course, is moving more toward, returning to doing space and all the other things that are positive, I think. But again, it takes big budgets. The Chinese seem to be leading the way in lunar exploration in many ways, but who knows? But what I'd like to do, if it's okay by you, Doctor, is let's talk about what people are able to see. And this is what we mentioned at the top of the program in hour number one. We just want to give a solemn time here in respect to both the seasons of Passover, which I understand begin on Saturday evening at sundown the 12th today, and then for the rest and going on to the 20th, and then this beautiful season of Holy Week and Easter. We find ourselves having this beautiful pink full moon that's coming up, and that'll be taking place as we move into the morning of the 13th and the evening of the 13th. And you know what? This is interesting, Doctor. I found this out. This is the smallest moon of the entire year. So when you're looking at that moon, no matter what you're doing as you move into tonight, for those of you listening, of course, in the AM on Saturday morning here and evening in the rest of the country and wherever you are, it's so interesting. It's the smallest moon called a micromoon. It's the farthest moon away from us as opposed to the opposite side. Isn't that fascinating?
Yes, it is, as a matter of fact. And maybe some people might somehow be not able to realize how the moon can be small and large as time goes on, knowing maybe that it's in orbit that is not even from both ends of the orbit. At one point it gets close, at another point it gets further away. And so when it's closer, we see it larger. When it's further away, we see it smaller.
This is amazing. We have a break coming up here, and it's interesting. But when we come back, we still want to hear from the people out there throughout the big powerhouse radio signal that 77 WABC has, of course. And we, again, mention the number proudly. We're 1-800-848-9222. Put that in your phone to speed dial us wherever you are around the world, and obviously here where that number will work. 1-800-848-9222. Simply WABC for the 9222. How creative. That is interesting. So when we come back, let's talk about this. Let's talk more about what people can see. The pink moon, why is it pink? We can answer that question. The doctor can go into a greater explanation than I can. And so many more things that probably you have as questions. How many of you have seen the Milky Way in the sky? Did you know only about 7% of the human population on Earth has ever seen the majesty of the arms of this galaxy, the Milky Way. Why? Because of light pollution. And we sure have it here in Phoenix. You sure have it in New York, and all places around the nation and the world. But not a reason not to look at the sky as we continue right after this break here on the Dr. Sky Experience. We're on 77 WABC.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Shirley McLean. I am having a wonderful time talking to Dr. Sky. Since I've spent a lot of my time looking up, I love to discuss what is underneath. And always remember to keep your eyes to the sky.
The great actress Shirley MacLaine talking about not only this show, but the wonders of the universe at 45 minutes after the hour. Our guest, as we move to the top of the hour, Dr. Carl Heico. He is obviously a man who understands what's happening out there with his PhD and his practical experience. So, Doctor, welcome back to the show. I want to get a good analysis from you of some of the time that you spent. This is amazing. You spent some time using the Hubble Space Telescope. Talk about that to us. This is great.
Well, I first became interested in pursuing that because I did have some exposure to astronomy while I was teaching it at the high school as part of the Earth Science course. And so I had some experience with working with those star wheels and noticing where the constellations were and so forth. But then I came across an article, and on the cover of the magazine Sky and Telescope, there was an image taken by an astronomer, Halton Arp. And in it, he showed two objects, as a matter of fact, that seemed to be connected to each other, but that idea was not accepted by the mainstream astronomers. They were saying they're too far apart to be connected. So I thought, well, maybe I'll submit this to a kind of a situation created by the Hubble Space Telescope, allowing amateur astronomers to come on using the telescope by submitting different proposals to it.
Well, that's amazing. That's almost like impossible to do, but go ahead. This is great.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the Hubble was rubble at that time. That's what the newspapers were calling it. Mm-hmm. And because of the mirror not being formed properly, they had to set up a pair of eyeglasses, so to speak, later to correct it. And in the meantime, though, while it wasn't getting very sharp images and clear images, they opened for the amateurs because there was more room left by the professionals who didn't want to use it at that point. So I made application to it, and I made it 3 times. On the 3rd time, I finally got in. I kept trying. I've got nothing to lose. So I got in on the basis.
You're a man of perseverance. I like that. Go ahead.
Well, no, it's something that you should pursue. Look at this, the Hubble Space Telescope. I don't care if it wasn't shaped properly or not at that point. It was the idea of using it some capacity. That's like major astronomy. And it's orbiting the Earth. It's not on the Earth. So anyway, I submitted the proposal. It was accepted and went to the Space Telescope and Science Institute on the campus of the college in Baltimore.
Yeah, Johns Hopkins. Right, Johns Hopkins.
The Johns Hopkins. Yeah, the Johns Hopkins. And that's where they had the computers. And I didn't realize it. But, when the photos were transmitted electronically from the Hubble, they were submitted not directly to the Space Center there, a telescope center, but They were sent to other kinds of areas like orbiting other satellites, bounced down to the Earth to Goddard Space Center, bounced back up again. We went through about 4 different kinds of bounces before it came to the Johns Hopkins University area.
Well, I'm amazed at what you saw here, but in the limited time we have, you're observing something that may sound technical to people. NGC 4319, this is this galaxy. Now, here we go, folks. Carl, you could explain it even better. 77 million light years away. I mean, that's not like the moon distance. This is like incredible. And you're also looking at the other object, this MAC 205, which is considered to be like a quasar. And your whole purpose, what? So I'm hearing this clearly, is that you thought there was a similarity, that these two objects were closely related. But what did your research tell you when you did this with the Hubble? This is fascinating.
Well, picking up the work and reading it, that was sent by Holton Arp, who, by the way, was kicked out of the astronomy club here in this country, had to go to Germany to continue his practice. He no longer could use any telescopes, make any presentations, or publish any papers here, because he was saying that the redshift is not a good determiner of distance, because the redshift showed what you mentioned, that the quasar was about 1 billion light years away compared to that galaxy that was only 78 to about 80 million light years away. Now, Holton Arp was saying, no, the quasar was ejected by the galaxy. And so what I did is I proposed to look at that with the WFPC, the Wide Field Planetary Camera, the WFPIC they shortened it to get some images. But I got it back fuzzy. They had to try to clear it up by using some kind of what they call a deconvolution program. It's a program to clear images. And it was cleared up, and I spotted the connection, but I was told, well, it's going to be hard to have this thing really accepted because of the fact that you use a deconvolution program, and it might not be a valid thing to interpret as giving correct data.
Wow, so, that's amazing that anybody gets time on the Hubble. But the interesting thing is, before we end, I wanted to mention this. You also have an interesting podcast out there called Carl's Orbit. So how do people go and listen to you? I just want to tell everybody.
Oh, just access, let's see. I've been passing the word, by the way.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll have to return with an answer to that one. But unless you can figure it out in the next couple of minutes, we'll just pass on that for now. But it is known as Carl's Orbit. And obviously, I'm sure you can find it wherever good podcasts are all around the world. You have some amazing guests on there. But I wanted to end off by giving both a combination of you and I talking about this for the next few moments, and there are just a few, that in addition to the beautiful pink moon that you'll be seeing as it celebrates the beginning of the sacred seasons of Passover and, of course, Easter and Holy Week coming up, the Passover season, don't forget, there's something other in the sky that I think is fascinating. In the morning, by around the 24th, as you know, the planet Venus shines brightest in the morning sky. So as we were talking, and the good doctor, that amazing beacon of light that you're seeing early morning there in the eastern sky is the planet Venus, the most amazing object in my mind. A strange world, a very weird planet, but we can talk about the weirdness some other time. And what, Doctor? The Lyrid meteor shower. This is something that people will be able to see on the nights of the 22nd, 21st, and 22nd as you look to the northern sky. Have you observed many meteor showers in your day?
Oh, certainly. I enjoy the Perseid meteor shower. That seems to be a big one from time to time. You know, there's a meteor shower almost every month, and not many people realize that either. But, of course, they're not as dramatic as some of the ones that we're talking about.
And, of course, get to as much of a dark sky as you can. But let's give hope in the final few moments. What can you see, ladies and gentlemen, from the lighted areas? We can see the sun, safely viewed or projected, obviously solar glasses for the eclipse. The moon, of course, fascinating in binoculars. It's a world that you could never stop studying. We never have any lack of interest in the moon. And all the amazing planets and even some bright stars, even from areas like Central Park in New York City and brightly lit areas like here in downtown Phoenix and wherever your city is. You get the last word, Doctor. Appreciate your time. And if you don't have a specific location for that, as Carl's orbit. We'll certainly catch up with you, I'm sure, in the future. But last closing words from you on all these subjects. Give us some inspiration.
Well, again, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. And you phrased everything so very nicely in terms of the pink moon and the coming season, in terms of the religious celebrations and things of that nature. You really brought it out very clearly and very nicely. And I'm sure people appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you, sir. I'm sure we'll be calling on you again in the local New York metropolitan area, the Amateur Astronomers Incorporated. You were the president of the group, and the reason we're having you, other than many reasons, and one of the many reasons, is that that was a group that I got started with. I'm a New Yorker by heart. New Jersey I lived, and obviously we beam out from the big powerful, the big radio powerhouse here, the flagship radio station, 77 WABC, the big powerhouse. Thank you so much, Doctor. We appreciate your time here, and I want to mention a few things to all of our listeners out there. If you have any questions or comments for me during the week, it's just drsky@wabcradio.com. We appreciate that. And from a poet a long time ago, I love this quote because it is absolutely one of them that Michael Caine talks about. He does it better than myself in that interesting movie called Interstellar, which has so much to talk about the time-space continuum and gravity. And the quote goes something like this: "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light to save our species." In the cosmic neighborhood, as Carl Sagan would say and has always said, and even if you haven't heard of Carl Sagan, these words hopefully will be reminiscent and resound and resonate, I should say, in your head. The Earth is the pale blue dot. No other object that we know of in the whole planetary system has any form of life like this. And it's strange to say it. Why can't we just simply all get along? Maybe extraterrestrials have come here. Who built the pyramids? What about all the different things that are happening? Could they lift 30-ton blocks? Maybe not. Maybe an extraterrestrial, inspiration happened many, many millions of years ago, maybe thousands of years ago. But that's why we do this radio show, to open our minds on the great mysteries that are out there in the universe, and they continue as we talk here on the Dr. Sky Experience. Always appreciative of your time. And sadly, if we never did get to you, just don't give up. I mean, we try to get through as many people respectfully to respect their interest in this particular radio show. And so many other things to talk about. And you may wonder, when we talk about American exceptionalism, as you hear on this radio station, the theme's always being talked about truth, justice, and the American way. I will venture into those topics as we move forward with great subject matters. I don't think we're just flipping our hat here. We have, obviously, great dedication, as I served in our American military, law enforcement, and so many other things. That doesn't give me a better position to say this, but we're so proud to be here talking about those same subjects, about our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, our sacred Second Amendment, and so many things about the sacrifice that many have made in the military. As we say, many gave some, but some gave all. And we appreciate your time. Until next time, I'm Dr. Sky with the Dr. Sky Experience. We appreciate that, ladies and gentlemen. And we'll talk with you next week with great subject matter, as we're looking forward to get some great guests back on the radio show as we talk with the iconic drummer of that great band of a long time ago, which is still around, by the way. We're talking with our good friends from Lynyrd Skynyrd, the iconic drummer Artemis Pyle, talking about a horrible plane crash that many of those members died in 1977. His experiences, not only from the rock and roll world, but who doesn't love Lynyrd Skynyrd? Again, Dr. Sky at WABCRadio.com for questions and comments. And I want to thank Tony, who's navigating this big powerhouse starship. We call it the Powerhouse 77 WABC. See you next week.